I found a comfort zone in analyzing figures. I was not leading from the front. I was making decisions very fast, not consulting. So people got disengaged. Increasingly, people came at me for decisions because that's what I did. And I got overwhelmed. I made bad decisions because I did not consult. And I found myself completely isolated and running the business like an outsider. I lost people. I lost good people who felt that, what's the point of working in a company where there's no consultation? And when I found myself on the brink of bankruptcy, um, I had to let go of the expats that I had brought into the business, and suddenly I had no choice but asking for help. That was that or going bust. And I started to ask my Chinese team at the time, what should I do?
Welcome to Entrepreneurism. I'm your host, Scott Pollack, a seasoned business leader, entrepreneur, and CEO coach with a passion for helping others achieve success in their entrepreneurial journeys. On this show, we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, uncovering why so many struggle and revealing what the most successful do differently. True entrepreneurs have unique superpowers, including the ability to spot hidden business opportunities and convert them into thriving ventures. For most mere mortals, this ability is absolutely unfathomable. But these same strengths can become sources of struggle, whether it's pursuing multiple opportunities without losing focus, scaling without eroding culture, or balancing short-term demands with long-term vision. The entrepreneur's journey is full of tensions. Here we explore critical factors that drive entrepreneurial success. How to stay focused, manage resources, build strong teams, and develop the resilience to navigate the ups and downs of the journey. Bold ideas, candid conversations, and insights that will help you unlock your full potential. Ready to learn and grow, expand your toolkit, and discover actionable strategies to help you navigate your own entrepreneurism? Let's dive in. And with me on the show today is Xavier Naville. Years back, Xavier moved from Paris to Shanghai, founded Creative Food Group, a supplier of produce to major restaurant chains in China, grew the company to 150 million in sales, supplying 6,500 restaurants, and executed a successful exit, selling the business to a larger UK company and staying on to run it for another 4 years. Of course, that's oversimplifying Xavier's amazing entrepreneurial journey, which he captured in the book, The Lettuce Diaries: How a Frenchman Found Gold Growing Vegetables in China. Today, Xavier continues to leverage his vast experience as a principal at Vision Management Consultants, advising on M&A and strategy in the food sector. He also helps other entrepreneurs scale their mid-sized businesses as a CEO and leadership team coach, something that Xavier and I have in common, and the focus of a regular mastermind that we have together once a month. Xavier currently lives in Taipei, Taiwan, and splits his time between Asia and the West Coast of the US. And one extra fun fact, he was previously a member of the French junior national fencing team. Welcome, Xavier.
Hi, Scott. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on to the show. By the way, I thought your book was exceptional. I mean, all of us have read CEO memoirs where the authors are full of hubris, adorning the pages with accounts of their unique genius and heroism. And at the end of the day, you say, well, what am I going to really take away from that? And you told a very real and gritty story about your challenging journey building a business in China, which for someone who's been in China for 20 years, I could totally relate to. You told it with great humility, and you made it both entertaining and educational. So I think the lessons from that and what we'll get today on the show will resonate for anyone interested in business and entrepreneurship, whether or not your focus is on China. So I'm really excited.
Thanks for that. It goes to my heart. When I started writing the book, my wife is a journalist, and her most important advice was, don't talk about your successes. Nobody cares. Talk about your mistakes. And that's really what made the book relevant for many people. many people called me in the US who had nothing to do with China and said, this is exactly what's going on through my mind. Reading you made me feel better. So that felt good.
Awesome. Awesome. So the podcast is all about entrepreneurism, and it's the superpowers, the struggles, the strategies, trying to really drill in and find the insights that either new entrepreneurs or those who are well into their entrepreneurial journey can take and can use. Um, a place to start. I'd love to understand, what was one of your greatest personal struggles as an entrepreneur, and how did you conquer it?
I mean, immediately what crosses my mind when you say that, my biggest personal struggle is that I was an entrepreneur at 27, and I was never a natural entrepreneur. I was a finance guy who was doing a business plan for a possible spin-off as part of a multinational. So, and the investors came to me and said, do you want to be the CEO of that spin-off? And I found myself with the CEO hat without ever having thought of being a CEO or being prepared for that. And so all along, I had this idea that I was supposed to know. In all meetings, I remember the thing that kept crossing my mind was, you don't know? You're such a loser. You're supposed to know. Otherwise, yeah, you're such a loser. And that's this imposter syndrome is really something that many CEOs resonate with. And yeah, so I won't tell you how I dealt with it over time. But if you're asking me what was my biggest struggle, yes, that was this idea that I was facing so many questions, so many things that were unclear, so many stuff coming at you, when you're running a business. And every time I thought I was supposed to have a solution for that. Otherwise, I was not the right CEO for the business.
I mean, as you know, it's actually quite common now that you look back, I'm sure, and then the CEOs that you're working with, uh, you know, the notion that the CEO is supposed to be perfect and that they've got to project perfection. Uh, of course, we know that that's not what makes a great CEO ultimately.
Mhm.
But I'm really curious. How did you overcome some of that? In order to find your footing and conquer that
Okay.
situation.
So first, I did not overcome it. First, I completely leaned into the idea that I had to project confidence, that I had to make the decisions very fast. And I tell you what happened. I made decisions very fast without knowing. I did not consult much because I thought consulting was an acknowledgement of weakness. And I was fearful that people would uncover how incompetent I was at doing this. I leaned into what was my comfort zone. I was a finance guy, so I thought I could run the business from my desk with Excel sheets and push a button and things would happen. Um, and um, and the result of that is that people disengaged. People did not express what they thought. They said, "Okay, he knows better, so we'll just follow." Especially in a culture like China, where the sense of uh, hierarchy is much more respected than in the US. But you would see that in the US too. People, if the CEO is very forceful in expressing what he thinks, people are just gonna uh, go along with what he says because they're going to say, "What's the point? Why challenge him?" So I leaned into it. I found a comfort zone in analyzing figures. I was not leading from the front. I was making decisions very fast, not consulting. So people got disengaged. Increasingly, people came at me for decisions because that's what I did, and and I got overwhelmed. I made bad decisions because I did not consult. And I found myself completely isolated and running the business like an outsider. I lost people. I lost good people who felt that, what's the point of working in a company where there's no consultation? And when I found myself on the brink of bankruptcy, um, I had to let go of the expats that I had brought into the business, and suddenly I had no choice but asking for help. That was that or going bust. And I started to ask my Chinese team at the time, what should I do? What would you do? And suddenly the insights that I got from that were very counterintuitive. And I realized that people stepped up, that they started to provide more suggestions and defend their ideas. And And the added complexity was that, people did not speak English at the time. So I had to very quickly get up to speed with my Chinese. And because I did not speak very good Chinese, people got very quickly used to not waste time when talking to me. They would not ramble on the phone. They would say they figured out that if they analyzed their issues in bullet points, I would make decisions on the phone because I could not read emails. So that created a certain culture in the company based on speed, quick phone calls, quick decision making, and a sense of engagement for the staffers who were surrounding me. And they were not very sophisticated people, but they knew China, they knew the operating environment much better than I did, and I accepted to listen to them. When I started to see that it was working, that their solutions were working, it created this mutual trust and it increased the cohesiveness of the leadership team. So I guess I'll stop here.
Yeah.
I've
Well,
got many other examples, but I'll stop here.
yeah. I mean, one thing, listening to this, uh, what I immediately take away is that you took the business to the brink. You had no choice. I like the way you put that. That you had to do something differently, right? And that you becoming vulnerable and building trust based on that vulnerability ended up shifting the tide. What I'm curious about is, you know, to go from the first mode of operation where you were leading from the back, as you put it, and just analyzing the numbers and making quick decisions, and your people didn't really trust you or even necessarily respect that you knew what you were doing, but you thought you had to do that, right? To this shifted position of you as a leader who let them know that you don't have all the answers and that you needed their help and that you needed their consultation. Um, how long did that take? And where, if you look back at that, what do you think it took from you in order to make that shift? Was there an inflection point that you can put your finger on? Was it just, certain behaviors that over the course of time were really critical in helping your people to trust you?
I mean, in the book, I told the story of a lunch event with who became my right hand in the business, Mike Chan, and um, and I was fearful that he would leave the business because he was loyal to somebody who had just terminated, and he had been hired by that person. But I could see that the guy was insightful and very competent. So I sat down with him and I said, I want you to stay in the business, and I will increase your salary to the same level as what I was paying that person. That was 4 times the salary that I was paying him at the time. And I just didn't know how I would do it. But I said to him, listen, I don't know how I will do it, but I will increase your salary to that level over the course of the next 2 years. If you trust me and if you stay in the business. Now, that being said, here is my problem and help me resolve that problem. The problem was that we were signing contract with Chinese farmers to supply lettuce to our factories, and they were never delivering the contract. We were signing contracts at a fixed price, thinking that providing them a fixed price would force them to focus on quality. And every time the market was higher, they would sell to the wholesale market. And I was always paying the market price.
Mm,
So, but when the market was lower, they were knocking at my door. So what I asked him is, so how would you handle that? And he explained to me, he said, in Chinese culture, the farmers they sell vegetable as a cash crop, so they're willing to speculate with that. So they're okay to get a cheaper price if the market is low, but if the market is high, they want to get the market price. The Chinese are they're big gamblers at heart. So he explained me, and he said we should change our contracts and start buying at market price rather than giving them a fixed price. And we did that immediately within 2 weeks, and that shifted. Immediately, we got what we wanted. We paid a little bit more, but when the market was low, we paid a bit less, and they accepted it. And over time, these suppliers realized that we were buying every day because fast food chains like KFC and McDonald's they need lettuce every day to put in their burgers. And we were a regular client. They started to make investment, and they had a rational change from peasant farmers who wanted to maximize every day to more corporate suppliers who had investment in the ground and wanted a steady client and consistency. So I would say we had a first win in the first couple of months, which gave me confidence. And I started to listen much more to Mike after that. And Mike guided the rest of the team on how to explain things to a foreigner like me, essentially saying to people, I recognized when people called me that they had talked to him first because they would talk, they would list their issues in bullet points, exactly how he told them.
So you gave Mike this opportunity to make a key decision, and you trusted him, so therefore he was able to put trust back in you, is what I'm hearing.
I had a sense that he was a competent executive, and I didn't want to lose him. And I made the bet. I made a promise that I kept. Mike
Mhm.
ended up having shares in the business and did very well for himself.
Cool. Let me shift a little. So one of the theses that I have is that entrepreneurs, tend to have a superpower or superpowers, and can manifest in different forms, because it's not an easy journey. And the ones who succeed usually have something, if not multiple things that really set them apart. Um, what's a superpower that propelled you forward as an entrepreneur? I know you're humble,
Yeah,
but
I've got a
you
straight
thought
answer
you
for you.
thought about this, right? And how did you leverage
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah. I did think about it. I'll quote a reader from the book, and I think that's the superpower. That reader said, when you read the book, you realize that Naville is not exceptional, but he refused to fail.
Ah,
All along, he refused to fail. And I think that's my superpower. I just stayed on the road. And at one point, things turned. I met great executive like Mike, investor came, and ultimately I sold the business profitably for everyone. But I refused to fail. I was not exceptional. I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, what I love about being a coach today is the idea that I can help CEOs be more intentional about doing things that I did without being intentional at the time. I kind of bumbled through my journey as a CEO. I did some things right. I did a lot of things wrong. And there's no reason for someone to go through the same journey as I did. So that's kind of why I do what I do today, so that it's not as hard for them as it was for me at the time.
well, stick-to-itiveness,
Yeah,
if you will, that is a superpower. I think most
yeah.
most would have given up a lot sooner. Uh, so, I mean, as you were, navigating that journey in China as a foreigner, learning the language, dealing with a lot of those issues, right? But also dealing with, first time CEO, first time entrepreneur. There are so many tensions as you're growing a business. I mean, you grew that business to 150 million in sales. That's a huge growth journey. And the tensions along the way of balancing short versus long term needs, and people versus process, and innovation versus just basic execution. All these kinds of things are just constant. With what growth tension did you struggle the most? And how did you learn to navigate that? Because I think that, again, as a coach, I also see it all the time that this is where a lot of the struggle takes place.
All right. So um, uh, first, I had a $150 million business that had the operational complexity of a business three times that size,
Yeah.
because the unit price in China was one third of as what you would get in the US for the same product. So that was a very complex business. The tension that I faced as we grew. So we went on the brink of bankruptcy. We did a few things right with the management team, and we started to grow. We started to scale. And when we started to scale, I started to bring in people and hire people. And I was obsessed with hiring people with big names, coming from big names companies, thinking that we're a small company. My executives, I was a bit embarrassed by them. I said they were not very sophisticated. They did not speak very good English, or did not speak English at all. They could not make nice presentation. And I said, we're dealing with sophisticated customers, KFC, McDonald's, Starbucks. We need people who are more sophisticated. I was not intentional enough about bringing people who had the right character. So what happened is that I brought in people. I was not very clear about what I expected from them in terms of behavior, and they started to adopt um, uh, a management style that they had learned somewhere else. So they imported a culture and a style that was very different. Remember, the team that that got me to profitability was a very small team, very simple team, and we had a certain way of working together. People called me directly. I was accessible to everybody. We did everything by phone. There was no long email, no long memos. It was very agile, and very entrepreneurial. And there was a very deep connection with me because I respected all of them, and they respected me for staying on the road and providing a job for everybody at the time when it was hard. So the biggest growth tension was that I started to bring people who got into conflict with my team. Some of my team came in tears in my office and said, I can't stay in this business if it's changing like this. And and some people who came in immediately left. I had a guy from GE that I had spent a lot of time recruiting who told me, what's my training budget? I said, you're my training budget. I don't have a training budget. The day after, he had resigned after 6 months of courting him. So I think that's the biggest tension. And people ask me, what would you do differently if you had to do it again? I would get that right from the beginning. Get these sets of behavior who are usually associated with who you are as a person or as a leader. They're not always nice behaviors, but say, this is what we do, and this is how we do things in our company, and be very systematic when you hire people, when you assess the people's performance. Be very systematic about making sure that they're living these behaviors. And if they're not, let them go, even if they're great performers, because otherwise they become like cancer inside the organization. So I struggled for that for years and years and years.
That's such a huge one that we see all the time. Hiring for just the productivity, but forgetting the culture and the
And
core
the
values.
challenge and yeah, and the challenge is that, remember, I was a finance guy. So for me, all that was fluff. The culture, the mission, the vision, the purpose, whatever you call it, the values was fluff. I said, I'm not running this company for fluff. I'm a figure guy. And that's and the mindset shift was really that if I had to do it again, I would start with that. Get that right.
That's perfect. The soft stuff is the hard stuff.
Exactly.
I love it.
Everything derives from that. It's like a magical thing. If that culture is lived every day, people make decisions on their own, they take initiatives on their own. Nothing comes back to you because people know how you will behave when you deal with choices, and the speed of your organization increases dramatically.
Yeah, for sure. Any other business principles that you would say had the greatest impact on your growth, either as an executive or the growth of the business, I would say?
I think the other business principle that I take away from that experience as an entrepreneur, and that I emphasize when I talk to entrepreneurs today, when I coach entrepreneurs, is really this idea of a vision. This idea of set where you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, whatever you call it. People call it BHAG, other people call it vision, other people call it painted picture. But imagine where you're going to be,
Yep.
um, and um, and make all your decision and all your operational choices in the context of that vision. Why? Because what happens is that if you're not clear about this vision, you have different uh, stakeholders around you. People advocate for different ideas or different projects or different directions, and you make decisions, and it's really hard to bring people along if you make decisions that are just decisions because you're the boss. um, so I would say that the biggest takeaway is to spend a lot of time with your team to debate where you want to be in 5, 10 years, and not do it alone. I used to do that alone on nice PowerPoint presentation. Then I would go and raise money with financial investors. Remember, that's what I did well. And then I would come back and people would tell me, oh, we're so confused. We don't know what the company strategy is. I'm like, wow, super smart people are giving me millions because the strategy is clear and you don't get it. Yeah, of course they don't get it because they never participated in the discussion. They didn't understand the choices I made in my head. So I would say get the vision right and do it as a group. And again, back to the first question that you asked me, what was the biggest struggle as an entrepreneur? This idea that I was an imposter. It's hard because it means you have to accept that for hours, people are going to challenge your original idea of a vision. You have to take the input, discuss it. Ultimately, you make the call, but go through that process that is a bit messy, may take a day, may take 2 days. Some people take 6 months to get to that. But once you made a choice about the direction and the what you want the company to be in 5, 10 years in a very specific way, then makes everything else is much easier. You can allocate capital, you can choose business model, and the question that you constantly ask to your team is, does it get me to the vision that we all agreed on?
Yep.
Faster or slower? And that's the way to that's a nice way of creating cohesiveness because even if people disagree with your choice, they understand why you made that choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And you were implying it, because the vision that you and the team have come up with has to, keep coming up as the context for important decisions that are made later on. But that implies that, it's got to be repeated as well.
That's a good point. One of the things that you do with your teams, I know, is that quarterly you go back on this vision and you say, okay, are we still all aligned on that? The way you repeat it is also in a very concrete way. It's every time you have a choice to make, you make an intentional effort to put your decision in the context of the vision. And that's the way people learn about it because it's very practical, right? Otherwise, it's just a poster on a wall in your meeting room.
Yeah, which doesn't work. Yeah, no, for sure. It's got to be practical. It's got to resonate in the day to day. So
Yeah.
that's great. Okay, time for a few quick fire entrepreneur hacks, I like to call it. What's one book every entrepreneur should read?
Um, so there's one book I read when I was not reading any book when I was an entrepreneur, any management book. I'm also French, so this is not in our culture. If you go to the shelf of a bookstore in Paris, there's no self-help books. Uh, Maybe that's because the French they think they know it all already. So one book that I really liked is by Patrick Lencioni. He wrote a lot of nice book, but that book is maybe less known. It's called Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive.
Hmm,
And
great book.
it rehearses the disciplines that he talks about in many other books. But for me, it was an impactful book because I was an entrepreneur. I was struggling with making my organization more cohesive, of holding people accountable, imposing myself as a leader of a group of people who were from a different culture, different language, in an industry that was still new to me. So that book had a big impact on me. So Obsession of an Extraordinary Executive by Patrick Lencioni. And maybe an additional book would be Positive Intelligence by uh, Shirzad Shamir,
Hmm,
which is a New York Times bestseller. And it's a bit different about the way your brain functions. And it helped me too.
awesome. What's one thing you do every morning to set yourself up for success?
All right. So one thing I do every night is that I close my day at a specific time. And the way I close my day is I write down all the stuff I have to do tomorrow.
Mhm.
And then I don't look at emails. I don't look at things so that I can have enough time for the family. So the first thing I do in the morning is I get myself a cup of espresso. I sit down in silence. I wake up at 5 usually, so nobody's up, and I visualize my day, my coming day, meetings and coaching calls and things I wrote the day before.
Awesome. What's a tool or app you can't live without?
Well, today's ChatGPT. I'm using ChatGPT as a personal assistant. I'm careful because sometimes ChatGPT goes hallucinates, as people say. But I it really helps me um, uh, flesh out a bunch of ideas, and then I pick and choose from it.
Cool. Uh, what daily habit keeps you grounded?
I exercise a lot. So I have a coach, and he puts exactly my exercise schedule on an app called Training Peaks. So the first thing I do after my coffee is look at Training Peaks and see what I have to do today.
And what's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
I think I mean, I formed that idea over time, but I saw someone express it really well. It was the coach of Serena Williams, Patrick Mouratoglou. He's a French guy.
Hmm.
And he said, it's not about what you do, is what you do is what happens to you. And
Ah,
this idea that focus on what you can control, um, and it's really important because we all tend to get upset about events, about behaviors, about a customer that is behaving in a certain way, an employee that is behaving in a certain way. And stepping back and looking at, you know, what is it that we cannot control? What is it that we can control? And focusing on that is much more constructive. So that's probably the best business advice.
I like that. I like that. It actually sort of reminds me of one of my favorite not Patrick, Jim Collins. One of my favorite Jim Collins principles. He calls return on luck. But that similar kind of notion that like we all have good luck, we all have bad luck. And as a matter of fact, whether it's good or bad luck, frankly, usually we don't know until later anyway. But the notion of don't get caught up in what comes at you. Think about how are you going to get the best return on whatever those events are or whatever those
Yeah.
shifts
Well,
are.
there's a more philosophical way of looking at it that came out in a book by Viktor Frankl, the author who talked about life in concentration camps and
Yeah.
how people who survived are the people who dealt with the reality
Yeah.
that, that they had in front of them. People who did not survive are the people who just constantly hope for better.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. So last question of the day. The road not taken. Um, Imagine that you could do creative food again, start over, right? And could only bring one lesson from your experience. What lesson would it be?
That would be um, to start very small and try things, prove them before investing heavy. I was so in love with the fact that I had raised millions for the venture because I was a finance guy. I thought I had succeeded because I had raised the millions that I loaded myself immediately with 3, 4 factories.
Hmm.
And it took 3, 4 years to fill up these factories. In the meantime, I lost a lot of money and created a lot of stress for myself. So if I had to do it again, I would be much more agile. I would, make a factory work. I would not create big overheads. I would have a much flatter organization than I had at the beginning.
That's another Jim Collins principle. Shoot bullets first, then shoot cannonballs. I really like it. And I really appreciate you joining the show today, Xavier. We barely scratched the surface on Xavier's incredible entrepreneurial journey. So pick up his book, The Lettuce Diaries, to learn more. And to my listeners, we've got many more amazing guests lined up. So please subscribe, leave feedback, and share this episode in your feeds. Thanks again, Xavier.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for listening. Remember, entrepreneurship isn't just about spotting opportunities. It's about taking disciplined action to bring them to life. Hope you'll join again next time as we continue to unpack the complexities of entrepreneurism.